Want to have non-awkward conversations in English? Never ask this kind of question. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of this big wide world you happen to be in right now. I'm Julian Northbrook, and this is Doing English. We all know that when meeting and speaking to someone for the first time, asking questions is a great strategy to keep the conversation flowing. But did you know there are good questions to ask, great questions, and then questions that you should avoid like the plague unless you want your conversations to become stagnated and awkward. Now, don't jump to conclusions, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, aha, yeah, Julian, I already know this. I know exactly what you're going to talk about in this video. You're going to tell us not to ask questions that might be considered rude. Things like asking, are you married? How old are you? What's your salary? Or you're going to tell us not to ask about controversial issues, religious beliefs, political views, etc. Not so fast, ma petite pomme de terre. Although those questions are ones that, yes, you should certainly avoid when talking to someone for the first time, although it does depend on the situation, the context, and the person you are talking to. No, those are not the kind of questions I want to discuss in this video. The kind of questions I want to talk about here are far more subtle, far more dangerous for your conversations. And I can unfortunately say you probably do actually use these questions. You probably do ask people these questions, not even realizing that they are making your conversations awkward. I know this because most people actually learn them and get taught them in basic English courses. Okay, yeah. Julian, stop beating about the bush, will you? What are these questions that we should avoid in conversations at all costs? I'm glad you asked. Let me illustrate with a story. Go back an entire lifetime ago to when I was a lowly art student at a British university. One day I was in my studio doing some work and I twisted my back in a funny kind of way, and I quite badly pulled a muscle, and it was really painful. So I went to the doctors, and the doctor recommended that I go to one of these sports injury massage clinic places, whatever you call them. Have you ever been to one of these places? Generally speaking, they're run by people who are heavily into sports and may have been some kind of sports athlete, doer of sports in the past. And that was certainly the case with the place where I went. I open the door and step in, and I'm greeted by this big, burly guy who looks like a PE teacher. So I go in and he asks me what's wrong, and I explain to him. So he lies me down on a bed and he starts doing his thing. That was fine. But what wasn't fine was the conversation that came with it. It's like when you go to the hairdressers and the hairdresser feels like they have to make conversation, chit-chat, small talk with you as they cut your hair. But it's like, you know, they've got their hands in your hair and they're cutting it. You can't exactly get away. You are a captive audience. And you can't exactly ignore them either, because again, they've got their hands in your hair. So you kind of are forced to make chit-chat conversation with them. Well, this situation was exactly like that, except instead of having somebody cut my hair, I had a big burly guy running his hands up and down me. That might seem like an appealing situation to you, but I can tell you, for me, I did not want to be making conversation at that time. I just wanted him to shut up, get on with it, so I could go home. But oh no, he felt like he had to make small talk. So what football team do you support? He asks. I don't. I have about as much interest in guys kicking a piece of leather around a field as I do of cutting my own testicles off. Okay, so what sports do you do? At this time in my life, I was a skinny, malnourished art student with a bright green and pink mohawk. Do you really think I was out playing tennis or living at large on the cricket pitch every weekend? Hell no. Not one to be deterred, Mr. PE teacher tries again. Who's your favourite musician? He asks. Okay, so we're getting a little bit closer now. At least I look like someone who would be into music. And indeed, into music, I certainly was. But here's the problem. I've always been someone with very, very eclectic tastes when it comes to music. I'm into techno, electronic music, but I also like rock, and on occasion I like to stick a bit of classical piano on the stereo. I don't, however, have a single favourite musician that I would consider myself a massive fan of. I remember the conversation so clearly, like it was yesterday, because I answered the question with Peter Murphy, you know, the guy who fronts Bauhaus. Oh, what? You don't know? Well, no, neither did he. End of another conversation topic. The big mistake that Mr. PE teacher made was that he asked the wrong kind of question. He asked a kind of question that we call an absolute question. An absolute question is a class of question that asks for an absolute, a very, very specific answer, and leaves no flexibility, no leeway to answer outside of the confines of that very, very narrow, specific question. Think back to the questions he asked me. What football team do you support? Makes an assumption about me. It assumes that I like football and I have a team that I support. Realistically, this question can only be answered with the name of the team that I support. But when you don't support a team, when you don't even like football, what it actually does is make you freeze, because you have no ready answer, no simple answer that you can give in return. The next question was the same. What sports do you do? Assumes that I do sports and that I have any kind of interest whatsoever in sports. Clearly, like the previous question, this question is all about him, his preferences, and what he's into. If I asked him, what football team do you support? What sports do you do? He would probably be able to answer boom, boom, boom. No problem whatsoever. But I don't like football. I'm not into sports. I have no answer that I can give. And when we are put in a position where we cannot give a quick, clear, simple answer, talking to someone who we don't know, we feel bad about that. We feel guilty inside. We can't answer them. And we feel like we are ruining the conversation. We panic, basically, and the result is that we freeze up and the conversation loses momentum. It becomes awkward and we start to feel stupid. This was the same with the question, who's your favourite musician? At least now, Mr. PE teacher had switched the focus from himself onto me and what I look like I might be interested in. But the question, who's your favourite musician, is again an absolute. It calls for a very, very specific answer. And most people, when put in this kind of situation, actually don't have an absolute favourite musician. It's the same asking somebody, what's your favourite food? Well, shit, I like lots of different kinds of food. How am I supposed to pick just one among everything? Especially when my mood and my taste change from minute to minute, hour to hour. Hell, my tastes change from second to second, millisecond to millisecond. Again, the result is that we freeze. We go into panic mode. We don't know what to say, and we end up feeling stupid. And this kills the conversation dead in the water. The next logical question, excuse the pun, is of course, what questions should you ask in conversation to make the conversation bounce along in this light-hearted, fun kind of way? Well, that is something we have no time for for today, but we are going to cover in immense detail in Small Talk Superhero, the Advanced English Masterclass, live in London on June 9th from 1 p.m. till 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. We're not just going to talk about questions, of course. I've got a list of about 36 advanced English conversation techniques and points that we're going to discuss. But asking questions in conversation, whether it's with someone who you have just met, for example, someone who you are meeting in business, a client, someone who is visiting your office, or perhaps someone who has just started working in your office, or people who you already know, whether in social situations, again, in business situations. We're going to talk about asking questions in conversation to keep the conversation flowing smoothly, bouncing along. We're going to talk about what the best kind of questions to ask are, what other kinds of questions you should really avoid, and what I believe to be the ultimate question to ask in conversation if you want to guarantee a fun, light-hearted, interesting conversation. For more information about Small Talk Superhero, click on the link in the description or head over to smalltalksuperhero.com. With that, this is me, Julian Northbrook, signing off from another video. If you found this helpful, go ahead, give it a nice big old thumbs up. If you thought this video was crap, God knows why you bothered to watch to the end, but give it a thumbs down anyway. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and regardless, I will see you this time tomorrow in the next exciting video. Goodbye. That human beings need conversation in their lives is obvious, but what is not quite so obvious is why. Why do we chat? Why do we need conversation? If you've ever wondered about that question, watch this video here, where I answer it in some detail. And if you want my top 5 tips for more advanced English conversation, check out this video here.